Okay, so let me go back. Here, let me share the book with you guys. Let me just move that to the bottom. The last time we were together, well, first of all, good evening. And today is 27th of December, 2022. It is our last encounter for this study before the end of the year. And we have stopped on the chapter 27, work at last. Never could I picture the scene now before my eyes. It was neither a hospital nor a conventional nursing home, but a series of vast intercommunicating wards crowded with a carcass-like human forms. When he's talking here about carcass-like human forms, it's because the shape of the spirits that were treated in those areas were in a pretty bad shape, if I can say like that, right? And the forms they were presenting at the time were not pleasant. A strangely clamory filled the air, groans, sobs, and plaintive phrases uttered at random. Ghastly faces, bony hands, and monsters bore witness to their terrible spiritual misery. When we talk about so many mediums wanting to be clairvoyant, be able to see spirits, they do not see only nice things. They also see terrible things. And not everyone has the maturity to see things like that and not be affected. I'm not sure if I would. Imagine if I had the ability to see monsters around me everywhere I go. It's not easy. And sometimes a lot of people end up in clinics, mental health clinics, because they are just mediums that can see monsters everywhere. So upsetting were my first impressions that I had to resort to prayer to keep my strength. Tobias called an old nurse. There are so few assistants today. He asked, surprised, what has happened? Minister Flaccus sent word that most of them were to accompany the Samaritans to their rounds in the regions of the lower zone. Well, Tobias decided calmly, we must fill the gasps. There is no time to waste. Brother Tobias, have mercy, cried out an old man, clutching the bed and gesticulating like a madman. I am suffocating. This is 1,000 times worse than death on earth. Help. How could it be possible that the spirits feel like what he was suffering is 1,000 times worse than death? That brings to us a vivid information that the spirit can suffer.
Yeah. I think then that death normally is kind of breathe. Okay, you suffer, but it stop. That the spirit must be going on and on. If this, that's how I imagine, like 10 times worse, because the feeling that suffocate never stops, because it's just in the wrong mental state that just cannot get rid of that. So instead of just a quick death, you have the feeling for like probably years, whatever. He goes on for. Must be horrendous.
Yeah, it makes sense. And what comes to my mind when I see something like that is that we have so many brothers and sisters terminating their lives in a hope that their present suffering will finish. And they have no idea that it's just the beginning.
That was the quick one, yes. The death was the quick and light suffering. Much worse afterwards.
Can we imagine, we as spirits perceive worms eating our flesh? Must be atrocious, must be very painful. So, yeah. There are books like, I don't know in English, but there are books describing how serious is the situation of a spirit that committed suicide. I want to leave this place, to get out. I must have air, more air. Tobias approached and examined him carefully and inquired, why is Roberto so much worse? He had one of these worst crises, informed the nurse. Assistant Gonçalves attributed it chiefly to the heavy change of dense thoughts emitted by his incarnated relations. I know it's very difficult when we lose someone we love, not to be thinking, not to be crying, not to feel whatever. Because we love that person that moved to a different place. Right? But look at the description of dense thoughts emitted by his incarnate relations. Dense thoughts doesn't mean bad thoughts. Could be someone really sad about it. And the spirit will fill. If you have enough equilibrium where you are, perhaps you perceive that and fair enough. But if you are already in a poor situation, if you receive those thoughts, that will not help you. That definitely will not help you.
Guilherme, why he's suffering, suffocating? Does it imply that he died somehow suffocating? Because if the people on earth is thinking about him a lot, and as you said, it could be good folk, why he feels it, their faults of missing him or thinking about him, as suffocating, is suffocating him?
We have two things. I don't remember. Perhaps we're gonna find through the next page or so why he felt the lack of air. But for example, if the spirit committed suicide by cutting the throat,
okay, yeah.
that could be one of the consequences. If you're being drowned, for example, you still have that impression that you're still underwater, you're missing air. So it could be many things, but normally it's the consequence of what you had in your incarnation, right? In regards to the thoughts, our thoughts are very powerful. Our thoughts are matter. Because when we think about something, it's kind of, we are creating that thing. If I'm thinking about you, sending you good thoughts, I may help you. You may feel better. But in the other sense, is also true. If I send you bad thoughts, instead of helping you, I'm pushing you down even more, right? So thoughts are very powerful. And it doesn't matter if we are receiving thoughts from the incarnated or discarnated, because we are all spirits. So every time, for example, I say something about Ebony, for example, oh, I don't like her, or you see, she's this, she's that. I'm sending that bad energy to her. On the other hand, if Ebony sends to you, oh, look how nice she is, you know, look at how graceful she is. She's sending you positive thoughts. You will feel okay, you know. So thoughts are everything. That's why we have to be very careful with what we think. I'm pretty sure Ebony wants to say something.
Yes, I was about to say that in addition to him receiving those dense thoughts from his relatives, it was more so that he was so connected to them that he was able to feel it in that way. The rest of the sentence says that he lacked the mental strength to break away from his earthly ties. So perhaps if he wasn't so connected to them in that way mentally, maybe he wouldn't have felt their dense thoughts so intensely as he did.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I believe we are always connected to those we love, right? And the key is how well organized is our mental condition. Because if I'm okay, you can send me any bad thoughts and I may feel like a little bit, but it's not going to push me down. Mm-hmm. But if I'm not okay, that could be very heavy to me to take it on board, you know. As he is still very weak and lacks the mental strength to break away from his earthly ties, the poor creature has not been able to resist the influence. While Tobias gently stroked the patient's forehead, the nurse continued. Early this morning, he rushed out of the ward, crying loudly that he was needed at home, that he couldn't forget his wife and children, that it was cruel to keep him here, away from them. Lawrence and Hermes tried in vain to bring him back to bed. Therefore, I thought that it would be in his best interest to take away his energy and mobility, which I did by applying some prostrating magnetic passes to him. We have several examples through the mediumship meetings when the spirit wants to be in his home, wants to be with his family, wants to be with his possessions that he have acquired on earth. Sometimes those ties are so strong that's like a massive magnet bring him back to the place. So even when he received help, he may be brought back because he's still so connected to those. Do not need to be only relative people, can be material things as well. So it is complicated. So that's why it is important to get acquainted to the spiritual life when we are here, because that will prepare us a bit better to face ourselves when they move on, you know.
But I think more than that, Gilliam, more than just preparing for the spiritual life, it takes a shift in realizing that everything on earth is, we have this idea that earth is home. And yeah, lots of us could know about the spiritual realm. We could understand life, what life is like in the spiritual realm, but still we think about earth in our mind. Earth is home, and the spiritual realm is just a place that we go after we die. And we need to change that understanding. That is what spiritual education is all about. Earth is nothing about earth is home.
I see your point. Even when I am on the spiritual realm, I'm still on earth. The problem is to accept that we have so many different layers that we could be from time to time, and accept that we have to move back and forth from place A to place B constantly for a period of time. And the thing is, when I am on the spiritual realm, I don't want to come to earth, because I don't want to leave behind what I have on the spiritual life. To the spirit, to reincarnate is like I'm dying from the spiritual world to be born here on earth, what we call earth, right? Likewise, when we die here, we don't want to die. We want to stay here, because this is what we know, this is what we are understanding at this particular moment in time as my world. So I think is the fear of the unknown. I do not know what to expect when I move to that other place. If we have the structure, the assistance to know at least something about where I'm going to, that will help us. But if I don't, I'll become anxious, I'll become nervous, I'll become afraid, and I don't want to go. We don't need to go to the other realm to feel like that. Even if you go to a different country that you don't know, everything I described here is real. Imagine if you move from one realm to another one. So that's why I believe the Spiritism is a powerful tool, because it brings to us knowledge. Yes, I may think a little bit different than Ebony. I may think a little bit different than Liz. I may think a little bit different than Rafael. You know, we have 20 different people in the room, and everybody interprets things a little bit different. But at least we have a glance of what could be. Or even if I don't agree with what we're discussing here, at least I read, at least someone told me that could be like that. And then when we face that situation, perhaps I won't be terrified. Perhaps the little we study here is enough to give me a little bit of clarity to understand what is happening on the other side. Likewise, if I'm in the spiritual world, if I do get information of how things are here, it will help me too. It will help me too. So this is why I truly believe it's very important to study and to give us the opportunity to us to envisage something different than what we have here. Because when we go to the other side, it will be different. Won't be 100% like here. Perhaps we have the same processes we have, as we see through André Luiz, we have pretty much a lot of things in common, but it will be different. It won't be the same. right?
What came to my mind, Guilherme, is that I think above all is the trust in God. That for me, even doesn't matter if you move country or die and leave your family behind, is the thought about leaving your kids there behind, not be able to look after them, is what would kill me, or I think any father or mother, once they pass away, to be left. So I think that whatever religion is the belief that God will look after them, that you don't need to be there, that is above all, that can help you break away of that feeling that you have to come back to your house, is a belief that God will provide whatever they need, will look after my kid in my place. That's what came to my mind in this passage.
Yeah. It's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love and possession.
Mm.
We love our kids, but they do not belong to us. We love our husband and wife, but they do not belong to us. And our family is not just the family we have at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Our families are hundreds of different families from time to time, different actors, as sons, as husbands, as wives. How many different sons I had over my multiple incarnations. How many I loved, how many I deceived, I don't know. So it will be very hard. I don't pretend that will not be hard. It will be very hard. But I hope that when it happens, I will remember everything we are studying to bring peace to my heart. Because I know the distance will kill me, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I need to believe that there is something more. I need to believe there is a plan, there is a project for all of it. It will be hard. I know it will be hard, very hard. But with the little we learn, I prefer to believe that I will be a bit better than I was before. At least when someone trying to tell me, come on, things will pass, come on, wait a little bit more and you'll all be together again. That would be enough to trigger in my mind what I have studied, what I have been acquainted to. I guess it's very, very hard to someone that have no notion about the spiritual world at all. Someone that believes when we die, that's it, we finish. And then realize that it's not finished. So what is that? And as we hear quite often on the mediumship meetings, why we are never being told about it? Why we had to suffer so long before we get that information? Yeah, but it won't be easy. You did well, agreed Tobias. Though fully, I see that measures are taken against the influence of his family's attitude. They must be given a greater share of worries so that they may leave Ribeiro in peace. I looked intensely at the patient, trying to determine his emotional state. He wore a typical expression of the mentally deranged and seemed utterly unconscious of what was being said about him. He called Tobias automatically, as do children who know their benefactor. My new instructor, not noting my amazement, explained it. The poor thing is still in a nightmarish phase, during which the soul is wrapped up in its own afflictions, with little perception of anything else. Man, my friend, reaps exactly what he has sown. Our poor Ribeiro has been a prey to numerous illusions. I wanted to ask about his history and the source of his sufferings, but remembering Laura's advice on curiosity, I kept my peace. Tobias addressed the patient with kind words of encouragement and hope, and promised he would see to the means of improving his condition. That for his own good, he should calm down and take his confinement in bed patiently. Ribeiro, trembling pitiably and ghastly pale, smiled sadly and thanked him with tears in his eyes. He walked slowly between numerous rows of well-kept beds. Unwholesome exhalations filled the place, caused, I later learned, by mental emanation of those who were still under the painful impressions of physical death, or dominated by the low vibrations of inferior thoughts. So I will highlight that things here. These words are used exclusively for male entities. So when we die, depending on how we die, or better, how we lived, we may carry with us the physical impression of death. So when we have a spirit coming to our meeting saying that he had a cut, he's feeling pain, he's really feeling that, right? He deserved to be treated. Now, in regards to vibrations of inferior thoughts, we don't need to die to feel like our thoughts, really. If our thoughts are inferior, what will happen? We will attract spirits that vibrate accordingly to the thoughts we are having. I don't need to die to suffer that consequence. It happens with us all the time. So that's why it's very important to mind our thoughts. It's very difficult. I can even say that the level that we are in evolution today is impossible to have a perfect thought 24/7. It is impossible. We will think something that we are not very proud of through the day. But it's our duty to reduce the frequency that we think something that's not very positive.
It reminds me of meditation, Guilherme. When you're trying to learn to meditate, you have to, your thought, you start thinking about something, but you have to bring your thought back to the breath. So I think Spiritism is the same. Once you learn about your thoughts, every time that you start thinking about something in bad vibrations, you have to remember and bring back. And that's what the whole lost incarnations will be about, to learn to control it.
Mm-hmm. Friend of mine that is 97 years old now, he used to say, Thoughts are like birds. The bird may sit in your head, but the bird will only create a nest in your head if you allow it. If the bird sits in your head and you just, hey, move on, go on, then you are policing your mind, you are policing your spirit. Interesting here, without reading further, is that this particular area was a specific for male entities. So that thing that people say, the spirit does not have sex. We need first to understand what is the spirit. When we're talking about the spiritual body, with incumbent spirit, is male or female? Right? Tobias, I am parched and starving, shouted for a patient. Shouted a patient. Help me, brother, yelled another. For the love of God, I can't stand this any longer, cried out a third. My heart was heavy before so much suffering, and I could not help asking, my friend, how sad it is to see all these sufferings and tormented spirits. Why must there exist such a dismal place? Tobias replied with perfect composure. In observing this scene, you must try to see beyond the pain and isolation. Remember, brother, that these patients have already left the lower zones. I'll stop here a bit. Seems to be pretty bad, the shape they are, right? Imagine how they were before. They are in a bad shape in the city, in the wards, being treated, being taken care of. Imagine how they were before that. That was possibly a very unpleasant picture to see. Where so many pitfalls lie in wait for those who have heedlessly. I really don't know why we use so many nice words like that. Heedlessly neglected the spirit elves. In these chambers, patients are not only cared for, they are also prepared for their future redemption. We must bear in mind that their suffering is of their own doing. We were talking about that today, isn't it, Ebony, when we were studying earlier today, you know?
Yep.
There is no innocent being, you know, we do. And then we forget that we did. And when the payback's coming, we are not happy. Man's life is always centered wherever his heart is. This is damn important because where our heart is will define our existence when we are in our physical body and beyond. If my heart truly is connected to good things, I have nothing to fear. Even if I have left something way back that I need to fix, I have nothing to fear. But if my heart is not truly connected to good things, then we have a problem. Then we could have a problem, you know? So that's why I'm really an advocate of do it now. Change yourself now. Because if you change yourself now, at least you bring like a buffer to protect yourself, to diminish some of the sufferings, to reduce some of the burdens you may have to carry after. So change it now. The key is the heart. And after a pause, during which he seems deaf to the clamour around us, he added, "They are smugglers of eternal life." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They expect mere earthly acquisitions to have the same value in the spirit's spheres." And we have so many examples of that through the mediumship meetings. The spirits that are coming and they say, "Oh, I am this, I am that, I have this diploma, I have bought this, I have so much money," or blah, blah, blah. On the spiritual world, you don't carry that with you. And if you do give a massive weight to those things, chances are that you will suffer. There's nothing wrong to have possessions, knowing that you will leave everything behind eventually. If you know how to use properly, even better. But eventually, we all will leave everything behind. They believed that criminal pleasures, the power of money, infringement of the law, and the impositions of self would cross the frontiers of the sepulchres and still be enforced here, offering them new opportunities for further follies. We don't change when we die, right? So if I'm used to take advantage of my position, I expect to do the same when I'm on the other side. If I'm used to use my possessions not in a nice way, I expect to do the same on the other side. But it doesn't help, it doesn't happen like that. They were thoughtlessly businessmen who forgot. I have a problem with my tongue, you know that, right? Businessmen who forgot to exchange their material acquisitions for a spiritual currency. When in the flesh, they traveled to a foreign city. They always took care to provide themselves with the currency of the country which they visit. Yet, while certain of the inevitability of the final trip to the spiritual regions, they neglect to acquire spiritual values. Thus, the millionaire of the physical spheres become the spiritual pauper. That's a good thing. That's interesting, right? I am in France. Of course, I had to bring euros. When I'm going back home, I have to have pounds in my pocket because euros is not normally is not welcomed if I decide to buy a glass of water, for example. Why I'm prepared to go to the spiritual realm having nothing, no possessions, no spiritual possessions. And the problem lies if I don't believe there is anything else. Fair enough. You don't believe there is anything else. But there are so many people that do believe in some continuation after death, and they do not prepare themselves either. They come to the spiritual world with empty pockets. This is a food for thought. How true, Tobias, words could not have been more logical. After distributing comfort and hope, he led me to the next ward. Narcissa, the nurse, followed us and deferentially opened the door. As I entered, I nearly staggered with heart-sickening surprise. It was a chamber of vast proportions where 32 men with sinister countenances lay quite still on a very low bed. Their almost unnoticeable breath was the only sign of life they presented. These unhappy entities are in a sleep much heavier than that of most of our ignorant brothers. We call them the negative believers, for instead of accepting the Lord, they were unconditional slaves of self. Instead of believing in life, action, and work, they admitted only the victory of crime, immobility, and eternal nothing. They transformed their earthly experience into the constant preparation for a long slumber. And as they had no notion of good, of brotherly cooperation, there is nothing left for them now but to sleep for years and years as helpless victims of ghastly nightmares.
Why they say it's sleep for years and years? I mean, what? It's just calm them down before they can approach the spiritual life? Because sleeping, they're going to have nightmares when they say that. So I imagine the nightmares are going to be remember life, that they had it.
Mm-hmm. What came to my mind is that there are lots of people on earth who believes that after death, they will fall into a sleep until they are awakened in the paradise or something like that after a period of time. So sometimes they are sleeping because they thought that that was the right thing to do until God awakened them to be beside him. That's one thing that came to my mind. Another thing that comes to my mind is that the status they are, the only thing they can do is to fall into hibernation, if you like, a deep sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that deep sleep will allow them, through those nightmares, somehow, to start to change their attitude, start to change who they were. Because none of those things mentioned here is like a, how can I say, God's trying to make you do things right. It's not like that. It's just respecting you, what you did for yourself. So the first number of spirits that were described in this chapter, they were having problems to breathe, they have problems with this and that, but they were already communicating, they were walking, they were complaining, right? But perhaps they were like that before. They were also in deep sleep. As we were saying earlier today, everything is in our hearts. If I only did atrocious choices through my life, that will have a consequence. Perhaps this hibernation period is required to prepare yourself for next steps. Otherwise, you would be doing something wrong again and again and again. But this is me talking, you know.
But I think, William, I don't think that this sleep is a kind of resting sleep.
No.
At the end, Yeah, it's not a kind of rest and sleep, right? It's more like, so it's not something that someone would want to look forward to. Like, for
No,
example, right.
yeah, it's something no one wants to go there. Hopefully, no, I certainly do not want to go that way, but it's the only way to be treated. Let's say a group of benefactors went to this lower zone to rescue people. Some of them are so agitated that they will be conducted to a place where this kind of hibernation is part of their own treatment. It seems to be bad, right? But remember, they are not in the lower zone anymore. They're being recovered to be treated in a place where it is deemed to be a nice place. So even though we see something, oh dear, this is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But it's better than was before because of the place they are. So, yeah, I'm not looking forward to go to those places. I was horrified at these explanations and stared at Tobias, who began to carefully apply soothing passes on the patients. When the treatment of the first two was over, they both began vomiting a black substance, a dark and viscous matter with cadaverous emanations. Not a nice picture, right? Yeah. They are expelling poisonous fluids, explained Tobias calmly. Narcisa was doing her best to keep up with the cleaning, but in vain. For by this time, a greater number of them had begun expelling the same dark and fetid matter. It was then that I instinctively got hold of the cleaning implements and set myself to work. The nurse seemed thankful for my help, and Tobias threw me a glance that well expressed his satisfaction and gratitude. The work continued. Yeah.
Sorry. Is that those black fluids folds kind of what is that? Because if they get the pass, yeah, so is there feelings? What's that? The fluid, the black fluid they are vomiting.
When you eat something that your physical body do not agree very well, what does it happen to you?
You vomit.
Mm-hmm. Vomit is the fluid, is the residue of what you have eaten, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those fluids are the residues of the places they were. They are the residue of what they have done. They matter. The matter of the physical bodies were so heavy because of what they did, because of what they taught, what they ingest. It has to be clean.
Okay, so it's false actions that they're vomiting, everything.
Everything.
Okay.
Sometimes when you eat something that is very clean, properly made, but in that day when you don't feel very well because you are upset, because you are angry, because you are sad, perhaps that food that will work well with me, will work well with Emily, on you because of your mental status, will not work. You feel sick. So When we are in a place, we absorb the fluids where we are. When the spirit goes to a dense place, he absorbs that dense fluid. And somehow it has to be filtered. Somehow it has to be cleaned. So that's my take of what has happened.
Okay, thank you.
The work continued through the day, bringing with it a blessed fatigue. No friend in the physical world could possibly appreciate the sublime joy of the physician recommencing his self-education from the humblest of nursing tasks. So I'll stop here for the last time. And basically, it was the first time he reported as engaging himself in the attitudes that we call true work. Imagining a doctor that was coming to a place, having to learn, having to accept his new condition, and after a period of time, his truly first work that he did was to clean the vomit of those entities. I think when things like that happen is when you start really to understand a bit better what you are, where you are, what you must do to continue. So that's it for today. Let's do a quick prayer so we can all have a good dreams, right? Father, that art in heaven, grateful we are for the opportunity to be here among friends, trying to understand a bit better what lies ahead of us. That your light help us all, help our family, our homes, to be in peace today and forever. So be it.
So be it.
Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks' time.
You.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Bye.